Well, howdy, folks. It's Mike again. This is going to be an interesting one. It is my first of the Ask Me Anything series. I love it when folks who do podcasts do Ask Me Anythings, and I think they're a lot of fun. So I thought, yeah, let's start doing them. So I posted on my Twitter, Webster19, that I was going to be doing one of these. And I know there's been lots of questions other places. I figured I'll just start them here and for this Ask Me Anything, and we'll get through as many of those as we can. And then if folks dig this, I'll do more of them. If folks don't dig it, I'll do more of them. Because if I dig it, I'll do more of them. That's kind of how I roll. But I love answering questions. And back when I did the workshops, and especially the ones that I did with Bill, I always looked forward to the question and answer thing the most because you have your presentation, you get through it and everything, but it's more stimulating and it's fun to just kind of think off the cuff. I loved hearing Bill's comments and I could kind of start predicting them, but every once in a while I was like, wow, I didn't think he would answer it that way. So that was always fun rather than just kind of the canned answers. So that's what we're going to go with. And I'm just going to do this because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Because if I would have asked a question and then mine got skipped, I would feel bad. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to skip anyone's, certainly not intentionally. What I'm going to do is just go through it in order of how people responded. And I'll share charts if charts need to be shared. But I'll just say this, I'm not an investment advisor. I don't play one on TV. This is an investment advice. Seek your own investment advisor. Had to get through that. So let's get into this and let's just see how this rolls. So again, I'll just share what I'm going to be reading off. Okay, well, here is my Twitter handle or my Twitter feed, and this is Webster1971. And so I posted this a little while ago on the 15th. And let's see, I have my little Sammy Hagar there because I'm such a huge fan of Sammy and David Lee Roth. I'm not a fan of you. Everyone knows that. But I'm a fan of the music you did with the boys. But people don't understand why I like Sammy so much better than David. And it's not necessarily his singing and everything that is far superior, his attitude is far superior, his lack of canned jokes that is far superior. But it's really when Eddie passed away, October 6, 2020, David started saying things like, oh, my guitar player who died or whatever. It's like, that was so cold. And even if he wasn't Eddie, just referring to as my guitar, put the person's name. And it was just really dismissive and not a fan of that. So that's when I kind of pushed down harder on the David versus Sammy because the approach he took. So anyways, this is going to be stock related or not stock related, as you can see, but there's my say. It just cracks me up every time that gif. Okay, so let's see. Finally happened. Webby looks just like Sammy Hagar. Love that. All right. Next is, and this is just an order of how they came, Les Paul or a Strat. And the best guitarist of all time and the best living guitarist. Wow. Okay. I love Les Pauls. I love Strats. I only have one Les Paul, and that was an Epiphone. And actually, Gil Morales gave that to me as a gift. And I think his wife, because he was a guitar collector, unlike me, he's a great guitar player. I'm a terrible guitar player because I spend all my time looking at charts and not enough time playing. So I've been trying to work on that and playing every night now because I love it. And it's a good, healthy distraction. So I would say for folks, pick up an instrument or a hobby that is a positive distraction. Going to the gym, going for walks, musical instrument, anything that is good. So, just a funny story about the Les Paul thing. I had saved up my money my first summer of just working all summer, or no, maybe it was my second summer. Anyways, I worked all summer and I wanted to go and get a Les Paul because I'm a huge fan of Slash, Guns N' Roses and all. And of course, everyone Clapton had played it back in the day in the Cream days, and well, everyone's played Les Paul, but it was really like a Jimmy Page Slash thing. And so I had worked the summer as a lifeguard and a swim instructor, taught kids how to swim and all that. And that was a lot of fun, very rewarding. Anyways, I get into well, I guess I could stop sharing for this. So I get to Guitar Center after I've saved up all my money, and I forget what it was, but it was like let's call it $600. And the Guitar Center was always having all these deals, and you could go in and haggle back in the day. And I go in there with my $600, let's say, and I'm thinking I'm going to be able to talk them down from like $800 on this Les Paul down to $600. And I go through everything I can do. And finally, the guy's like, no, we can't do it. And I learned so many sales techniques, shady sales things that shady salespeople do who used to work at Guitar Center back in the day. I don't think much, so much these days, but back in the day, man, they make used car salesmen look like good people. And they figured out that's all I had, and they were going to maximize that. So, to make a long story short, I didn't end up walking out with a Les Paul. I ended up walking out with a Kramer, a red Kramer guitar, not exactly like Eddie played, but it was close to it. And I was like, okay, then I'll go with this. And I've since given that to my son, and I gave him a Buddy Guy Strat that I got. And then he was also wanting something a little heavier. And so I gave him a choice. I'm like, you could use this, you could have this Les Paul, or you could have this Kramer. And I gave him and then he chose the Kramer, and is like a Strat like. But anyways, really nice guitar and all. But the thing was, I really wanted the Les Paul. So the moral of the story is, if you don't have enough money to buy something, I made that mistake, and that's why I kept that guitar forever. And I told him that story. It's like, if you save up for something, you don't have enough money, don't go and just buy something just for the sake of buying it. And that was the first and last time I did that. Like, it was an impulse buy. It was like, I had envisioned all summer that I was going to go and get this Les Paul, and I couldn't see myself leaving that store without it. And so I got this thing that every time I looked at it, I go, you made a mistake, Mike. And so I kept it around for that. Nice guitar, kind of like in that movie Crossroads, very similar to the one that Steve Vai plays at the end of the battle. And if you haven't watched the movie Crossroads with the dude from Karate Kid in there, and it's about Robert Johnson, man, you gotta watch that. You gotta watch that. Like, how can you not watch that? So anyways, I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but if you know the story about Robert Johnson, you kind of know what's going on. So the moral of that story was, and if you don't know why I'm just rambling on about this stuff, I'll talk about stock stuff. They asked me about guitars, so I'm going to talk about that this is for you guys. This Webby Rambles On, which is on my YouTube channel, Webby5150. But it's also, just as much as it's for you, it's for my future grandkids. My kids are 24 right now. They have no plans on having kids anytime soon, but I wanted to have something documented in case I wasn't around. So a lot of these are going to be kind of for them. So the moral of that is, again, just buy what you can afford, and don't buy something. If you can't afford it, just don't buy it. Wait until you can afford it. Maybe when you can afford it, you're not going to want it. But that stuck with me, and that saved me a lot of times later on in life when I was like, oh, I really, really wanted that thing, but I didn't buy it because I'm like, oh, I don't want another Kramer on my hands. But Kramer and Seinfeld, that was a good Kramer. All right, so let's go to our next one. Okay, our next question from Jack. Would love if you talked about individual stock precedents. I'm sure that would be a whole video, though. Also, what was your turning points in trading that made you profitable and start to perform much better? Oh, okay, that's good. So I'll deal with both of those questions. So precedents and what changed things. Right, so precedent analysis, what I would suggest folks do is to look at the model book episodes that I have. And I think I started off with Cisco, and we did Schwab, and we did Apple and Google and a whole bunch of them. I'm going to do more of those this year, but the more models you study, the more you're going to be able to pick up on precedents. And so Precedent analysis is not something I came up with. It's something that Bill used a lot, and I learned from him. Is he would study these model books, and he had this one in particular that he had it was like about 300 pages, nearly 300 pages, and he had to memorize all those charts, and it was from the late 50s through the mid 60s. We called it the Green Model Book. And if you're ever in Washington, D.C., and you go to the Library of Congress, at least they used to have a copy there that you can look at. And if you're ever there, I would do that. And some colleges have it too that you can check out or at least view there. And that's a very, very special book. His first real printed hardbound book. But I'll do more on precedent analysis during the models and as I see one. And there's a whole thing with that. And what I would suggest is if you think you have a precedent that you're using, just go on Amazon or go to Staples or Office Max or Office Depot, if any of those are still around, and go get yourself some transparency paper. And it's just clear paper that us old fogies used to use. And you just print off the chart that you think is that you can print off either one, but you can print off your target chart, like your current chart that you're looking at, and then your yesteryear chart from whatever year it was, and print that off on transparency. You just put that clear piece of paper in the printer. This was something I came up with, not something I ever saw anyone else do. And then put it over top of it. Make sure you have all the same settings. So it has to be from the same software. If you're using Market Surge, use Market Surge. If you're using a different tool, use that tool for both, because how it's laid out with all the moving averages and RS lines has to be the same. And then print out the one on transparency and lay it over top and then get a sense for, is it the right one or not? And there's lots of nuances to it, but that's one starting point. No, none are going to match up identically. So you're trying to get the spirit of it. It's like, do the moves happen in relatively over the same type of time frame and the same magnitude, and the pullbacks the same way? And because history repeats itself, but it's not identical. So you're wanting it to rhyme, right? And then what was the other question? The other question was, what really was the turning point? So the turning point for me was a post analysis, and something that I used to do all the time. But my first real one I did was after and I think I talked about it in either the goals or the fear episode, one of the two, and where I walked up to Bill, it must have been 97 or 1998, and told him that I wanted to be a PM for him. And he laughed, and then he said, okay, well, put your charts together and come meet with me. And then, so when you put your charts together, and by putting the charts together, it's a post analysis. You're like pulling up the chart. I bought it here. I sold it here. You learn so much from that, because what ends up happening is your mind plays tricks on you. You go and you're like, most people are wired one way or another. You're either wired where you like remember the worst, like me. Like I remember the worst. Like people are like, oh, your best trades. And all I can think of are all the things I screwed up, not all the great trades. Because it's like the great trade, that's what you were supposed to do. But it's all the mistakes you make is what I remember. And so that's one way of being wired. And other people are the people who don't want to look at reality, and they just want to remember all the good trades they did, and not the bad ones. And so the answer is somewhere in between. Like, don't be one side or the other. Like, just look at reality and do a post analysis, but do it in real time. I used to do this once a year, and I would dread it. I'd start dreading it in November, because come January, I was going to do a post analysis on the full year. And I trade a lot. That's just my style. Even when I was just position trading, not swing trading. And now I do both. These days, I focus more on swing trading, a lot more on swing trading, but I like both position and swing trading. And there's benefits to both, and drawbacks to both. And so blending the two makes the most sense, I think, for most folks. But anyways, I'd start dreading it. And because then I was going to have to look at all the mistakes that I made. And the other thing is, if you're looking at in January of like 2026, I'm recording this on January 21st of 2026. if you're doing it in January of 26 for all of 25, well, one, unless you don't trade much, it's going to be very time consuming. And two, you're not going to remember. Like, you're not even going to remember. Like, right now, today, like, the movement was about Greenland. Okay. I guarantee you, everyone's aware of what happened with Greenland and everything today. But fast forward 3 months from now, or 6 months from now, or 9 months from now, you're going to forget it unless you're like, have a really great memory on certain things. But there's always a crisis. There's always a wall of worry. There's always some big news event. And very few of them are ones that just stick in your head forever. Like after 9/11, like any of us who lived through that, you'll remember that until you're 80 or 90 or older. But there are other things like, oh, things in Greece, or, the Nikkei did this, or the carry trade, yen carry trade, or whatever. Is like, be like, oh, well, I remember that happened sometime, or the flash crash, or, oh, no, that's more specific. But that was what, May of 10? I could be wrong. I was in a Del Taco drive-through when that happened. I'll tell that story another time. So anyways, so with the post-analysis, maybe I should do an episode on that. Do a post-analysis regularly, so you're still in the zone and you can benefit from it and you can remember all of that. So it depends on your memory. I like to do them like almost every day. Just go, okay, what did I do wrong today? And just go, okay, well, mess this up, mess this up, mess this up. Like for today, I was in meetings all day and I did not see the news when the whole Greenland thing resolved itself, because I was stuck in a meeting. And then all of a sudden, I see this big spike, but it was 15 minutes later. And I didn't have my one program up that I use my alerts on. And it was just closed at that time because I was working. And so I was like, oh, mental note, stupid, Mike. Very, like I would have seen that and said, hey, look, got to pause in this meeting. So there's little things like that that can help you in the very short term, because if I was doing this next year, and I'm not going to remember that I was in a meeting and that I missed that turn and I got things 15 minutes late. So do it once a week, maybe every Friday, start it that way, or at the end of every day, just go, okay, what did I do wrong? But also, what did you do right? So the way Bill would do post analysis is focus on what you did wrong and fix it. And I don't like that. It's so negative. It's not that I don't like it. I hate it. It's like going to the dentist or going to the principal's office or going like having the cops pull you over. It's a drag, man. It's a total drag. So make it focus on what you did right, because then if it's like balance, what you do wrong and what you do right, you can either like try to fix what you did wrong or just try to do more of what you do right. And you're going to like kind of crowd that out of what you did wrong, because you're going to just turn your weaknesses into the strengths and things. So if you've got a problem, we all have a problem. I've got multiple problems, but think about what is your problem. A lot of people have a trouble selling something and buying something back. That's not my problem, because I got over that problem. Then I had other problems, but then just go, okay, well, I'm going to just tell myself, if I sold something, well, the stock doesn't care that I sold it. The stock doesn't remember. That's just all ego. Like, why should it matter if you just sold it based on the information you had at the time? Well, you either made a good trade and now it looks like it's going to set back up and you should buy it back, or you made a bad decision in selling that in the first place. And so reverse it sooner rather than later. The sooner you change something from a problem to a solution, the better off you are. Hopefully that makes sense. So in summary, what to do to get better quicker, and that is just doing a regular post analysis and focus on what your strengths are. We all have different strengths. I know a lot of people were really good at just sitting. They buy a stock, and it might not even be the best stock, but they buy it and they just sit and they patiently just let it go up. And I overthink things a lot, and I'll look at it and go, oh, well, that doesn't look right. And that group is getting hit or whatever. And I'll start backing away from that, and I'll be premature on that. And then I'll have to buy it back. And it works with my style. It works for me, but I also realize that many times if I was just lazy and just went to the beach all day, well, it'd be hard to go to the beach in Austin. But, if I'm out in California, that would be a lot easier. It's just not me. be comfortable in your own skin. All right. So let's see. That took me a long time. Long time. Uh, all right. So let's see. What is our next one on here? That was from Jack. So Alex, let's see. How do you position size big enough to make a difference, but not so much so you're watching it all day? Okay. All right. So basically, position size. Okay. Position sizing. That is a problem that I've had since day one of trading. And because it's a moving target. Position size moves with your experience, moves with your market, the market conditions, moves with what style is being favored. Like, is it favoring a swing trading environment, day trading environment, position trading environment, or just stay out of the market environment? So it's really dependent on what the market conditions are. So it's a moving target. It's not like it's always going to be this amount. I mean, I can tell you, there are times where we were ultra concentrated at the firm. I've told the story, I think, during the Google or the Apple model book episodes, Webby rambles on, where the entire firm, we were in two stocks, Apple and Google, and this was like 04, 05-ish time. And I was 120% in Apple and 80% in Google. And afterwards, and we made a lot of money on it. But afterwards, I studied and I said, well, if I would have just had 25% in each of those, so 50% in two stocks, which is huge and crazy, crazy, I would have done so much better. But being 120% invested in one stock, every night I went to sleep. I'm not kidding. And I know it sounds terrible, but every night I went to bed thinking Steve Jobs was going to die and his private jet was going to crash. And I just worry. I'm a worry wart, man. You are what you are. And I went to bed every night with that. And the stress that caused me, because not only would I have been wiped out, the firm would have been wiped out, because everyone in the firm was pretty much, it was like 100% in Apple and 100% in Google. We were just split differently, 120%. I didn't worry about my Google position because 80%, like, what are they going to do? Like, that's what my thinking was at the time. And so you got to find that level that works for you. And you can do that through a post analysis. Go back and say, okay, well, once I got over this level, I started trading off of the size and making mistakes off that size. So you want to get it as high as possible, but not too high. And that's a moving target. And I am doing work, just not, I don't like giving out information until I've worked it all out. But I am working on a book ideas, and this is one of the things that I will be doing in that, if I ever get the time to do it, it would be as much for me as it is for you guys, is having something more black and white. When I can come up with black and white rules, it's so much better for me. And just having things that say, okay, if my equity curve, meaning my account value, is above its 10-day moving average and above its 21-day moving average, and those are above its 50 and the 200-day, then I play with these rules. But if if my equity curve is through the 10 and the 21-day, but still above the 50, then I play with these rules. These rules meaning how deep in the market can I be and what position size what's my max position size. So it's a long way of saying that there's no real perfect way of doing it. I will say that Bill came to me one time because he saw me varying my bets, varying my position size, which is something I've kind of done a lot of, where I'd have, if something is more risky, I would have a smaller position, and something that's less risky, I'd have a bigger position. And then that didn't bother him so much, but it was when I started having some small positions that I wanted to play in it, but it was too much risk for me. So I just buy a smaller amount. And then one of those really worked, and it was out of position to add to. So I had this big gain with a small position. This is from memory way back when, a couple decades ago. And Bill told me, he's like, hey, Mike, look, what I do, and this was the nicest way he said, Mike, now this might sound funny, but every time I go into a stock, I start it with, and then he told me the dollar value in millions of what he would start with. And he's like, because I don't know what the next big one is going to be. And you want to have it be meaningful. And that sat with me for a long time. So then I started having a bare minimum for everything, and I have ever since. But that minimum will change. At times it'll be as low as 1.25% in a position. Sometimes it'll be 2.5%. Sometimes it'll be 5%. Sometimes 7.5%. Sometimes 10 or 15%. It just varies. Bigger depending on the better market and really the better I've been doing. When it's questionable or choppy, they'll be smaller. That's just me. You got to do what works for you. But again, I'm trying to work on some black and white rules for myself that then I would share in a book or on these podcasts. There's something else on that would have been important. Yeah, sleeping. And there's something to be said for the old sayings like settle down to the sleeping point. That is so true. Just have your phone. Well, you probably have your phone or notepad or something next to your bed. And if you go to bed at night and you start thinking about your position, that it's too big, if that's at all a worry when you're in bed, you have too big of a position in it. Make a note to yourself and just go into your notes and go, okay, my XYZ position is, 27% and I'm feeling uncomfortable, or my X position is 51.5%. Because I do have a couple of 51.5% positions because I roll like that. Don't do what I'm doing, but I have one right now. But oh, I'm feeling very uncomfortable with that position, or I'm feeling like that needs to be bigger. More so write it down. Is it too big? And then adjust that and just look at those notes, and then you'll start finding your sweet spot for you, because everyone is going to be a little bit different. And Bill was like he never had a problem with a large position, because as long as you were up on it, and you wouldn't have a large position unless you were up on it. There was never an issue for him. Because he was the dude who would go 200% long one name, not towards the end of his career. All right, let's look at the next one. Okay, let's see. Alex. Next one. Rich. Okay. Awesome. Would love to hear about your 1,000+ year reference in Bill's book. That was so nice of him to put that in there. What was your mindset like? What were your days like? What were your biggest trades? Anything about that would be good sharing. Okay. So that was 1999. All right. I had some sort of technical problem, so I'm back. It was actually 1,640%, but Bill thought that folks wouldn't believe that. So we put it to 1,000. That was fine with me. And it was all stocks, not options. What was your mindset like? What were your days like? What was your biggest trades? Anything about that you are good with sharing, and amazing to hear about that. Okay. So that was 1999. I was on, and I talk a lot about this in, I think, the goals or the fear episode. So if you're really interested, go back and watch those again. But I was on a mission to become a PM for Bill. I left T. Rowe Price in 97 to come take a pay cut to work at William O'Neill. And kind of I took a pay cut to come back from being a PM, the family office out here in Austin, to come back to IBD, because my heart was really there. And I really felt like there were things that I needed to do with Bill's passing and the farm being sold to a different place. I knew what Bill would want, and it was worth it to me to take. Wasn't the sole reason or the only reason, but it was. I like doing the right thing, and I knew what his legacy needed, and I knew that I was pretty much the only person who knew that and how to do it. And so I'm trying to do that with my time here. I'm not sure how long I'll be here, but it was very important to me. It was a big part of my life, and anyways, so I left T. Rowe 97, started working for him February 3rd, 97, but was just in the research department, and I wasn't working with him. And he would just, very rarely would I even see him, but I just wanted to be a PM for him more than anything I ever wanted. And if you've ever read David Goggins' book, his first book, and if you haven't read it, read both of them, but his first book, Can't Hurt Me, it was pretty much like that. But instead of being out in the cold and stuff, trying to be a Navy SEAL, is like trying to be a PM for Bill for my path. I saw a lot of easy paths, but for my path was, I would say, honestly, I think if I ever got to meet David, who's one of my idols, and I think that's the best book out there, period, David Goggins' books, that I think he'd agree that I had just as hard of a time, if not harder, than him. But most of those stories cannot be told in the public. But it was hard. Let me just tell you, it was really, really hard. And if you want something bad enough, you will figure out a way to do it. And so that's what I'd wanted. And so what I would do is all of 99, I just basically didn't sleep. I just looked at charts, and I was doing a full-time gig at the time in the research department. And they would not let me look at charts. We didn't have charts on our desks, and I didn't have the internet at my desk. We only had the internet around the office. And so everyone would know if you were going up to check a quote. So I could only check the quotes every once in a while. So I had to do all my work the night before, and plan for the day. And so what I would do is I'd print off a ream of charts before I'd leave, because I did not have access to the charts at home. They wouldn't give that to me. They gave it to a lot of people who didn't want it. I asked for it. They wouldn't give it to me. I was driving 60 miles one way in frickin' LA traffic, and they wouldn't give it to me. All I wanted was a Pepsi, just one Pepsi. One person got that. But anyways, I print off the ream of paper of charts, a daily, weekly, interday. For a while, I was doing a daily, weekly, monthly, and interday, but then it just took longer to print. And then I would go through my process of all of those charts and then mark it up the night before. I'd take out my ruler and pen and rate each stock. Back then, I would do it a 1 to 10. Now I do it A through F, of what was the rating of the stock, meaning, was it a 10 that was the best? Or was it, I don't know if I ever marked anything as a 10, like 9 plus would be the highest I would normally go. And then I wouldn't trade anything under what I would rate a 7. And 7, it was just an overall rating that I would give based on the daily, weekly, and interday. And then I mark exactly the price I was going to buy it, exactly how many shares, and I'd just put buy stops in. Whereas basically, if the stock rose up to a certain level, then it would execute. And pre-market, I'd put those in. So I would know ahead of time all the trades I was going to do, because I couldn't watch it during the day. And that helped a lot. So sometimes what is a disadvantage for you, and it truly was a disadvantage, is actually there's a way to make it an advantage. And what it did is it forced me to do all my work ahead of time, and I would know precisely where I was going to buy it. And I wasn't trying to make money, and I wasn't trying to make a big percent. I didn't care about any of that. I mean, of course I cared. I started off with nothing, and I wanted to make something, but I really just wanted to be a PM for Bill. And it wasn't about the money. I just wanted to work with who I thought was the best PM around. And I was trying to prove that I could buy the stocks before he would put them on his service, just like I run Swing Trader with Justin now, and the guys do Leaderboard. It was like that, but for institutions, and Bill and a few of his PMs would pick stocks for that list. And it's called the NESME, or New Stock Market Ideas. And he would sell it to the Fidelities and hedge funds of the world. And what I thought the best way to get noticed by him was to buy stocks before they would go on the list. So I wouldn't buy the stocks that he already had. I would buy the stocks before they went on, to try to prove that I knew what I was doing. So I would buy them exactly right. And then when they got extended to a point where I thought, oh, well, Bill's not going to put it on up here, I would just sell it. So I was buying it exactly right and selling it extended, and then just compounding. And that's how I got to 1640. And it's like, you can do that. And I was doing the other things, like everything textbook. I was only trading things. I took his book, which was the red version of this version. You got to get this book. Did I do a lot of work with him on this book? Yes. Do I get paid a dime for this? No. Do I still think you should buy it? Yes, because this is, what, $16, I think, is what you can get it a lot, $16.95, but you can get it a lot cheaper. Or go down to your library if you can't afford it. Don't be embarrassed to go to libraries. And I used to go to the library all the time, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's factually, it's smart, and Bill would shop at the 99-cent store, and so would I, together, not together, but we would, it's like Dollar Tree. 99-cent store isn't around anymore. We used to trade that stock. That's why I know, because we talk about, when we'd shop there. But I was just trying to do exactly what he said in the book as I understood it. Now, I understood a lot of things incorrectly, but and that kept me out of a lot of the best stocks like the Qualcomms and the Ciscos and the Dells and those things. And I was trading more in the small and the mid cap range because that's how his first edition and second edition books were written, towards small caps and mid caps. That's what I did. I did it exactly right. And I did not sleep. I would wake up, I would drive 60 miles to work one way, in stick shift, in traffic, work all day with a freaking tie on, which is silly. Ties are silly. And then print off the charts before I leave, bring that ream of paper in on my drive home. And don't ever do this, kids. But, well, by the time my grandkids watch this, everyone is going to be full self-driving for everyone. So you can do this. But I would, as I'm driving, I would have the sheets of paper, the ream, and I would go through, and the ones that I liked, I would put on the seat next to me. The ones I didn't like, I just throw on the floor. And then when I got home, I'd take all of those, throw them in the trash. Those were before the recycle days. Take the ones that were on the chair. Those were my first pass at them, and then go in and mark them all up. Wake up in the middle of the night to check the Japanese market, because back then there was a kind of a connection that I saw between the Japanese market and our market. I didn't need to wake up. What was I thinking? I should have just slept, but I didn't know any better. And I was on a mission, and I did every single thing. And that's all I did that year, 98, was just trade. My ex-wife, wife at the time, would always say, "Oh, can we go do this or do that other thing?" And I would say, "No, it's crucial." And she would tell me, "Well, Mike, you said that it's crucial all the time." And I said, "Well, because it is." And it was. It is what it is. So, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And that was before kids. So once kids came around, then I stopped working on Saturdays eventually and just worked 6 days a week. But before that, it was 7 days a week all the time. So you asked, that was the thing. Let's go to the next one. Okay, the next one, we've got Josh. What would Bill own right now? What was it like working for Bill? Would love to hear more stories. Well, I did just tell, so what would Bill be in right now? Well, I do have a position in it, but I think he would be on Lily. And I've talked about that on IBD Live. I'm on Wednesdays these days. Used to be on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but I'm working on right now revamping the Growth 250, something I created way back when, and I'm redoing it. We're redoing Pattern Rec and redoing all of the ratings, because Juan owns all that, and now is our time where we got to get off of what they own, and so I'm having to rebuild everything from scratch essentially, and it's a lot of fun, but it's very time consuming. So don't even have time to be on live at all. But I'm on Wednesdays, and then when I'm get done with this stuff, we'll see if I go back to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or if I have continued projects. But I prefer being on. Well, I prefer it all. I love doing it all. Really do. It's just not enough time. And I love to trade, and I love doing these Webby rambles on. Really do. I dig what I do. I'm very fortunate that way, but I just need more time, and I need more downtime. Anyways, the question was about Bill. And so I think he would be on Lily, which I have a position in right now. And it's hard to say, like with some of the other ones, some of the best performing ones. So like SanDisk, I'm in SanDisk right now, but that he would not be in because the earnings were negative. So it would really be, you know what, maybe I'm going to jot this down. So I'm going to do a post analysis, and I'm going to do a Bill type of thing of like what to search the way Bill would search, and do something specific on that. And as far as Bill's stories, I just kind of tell them as I think of them, and just have them come out naturally. I don't do any, as you can see, I don't do any planning for these things. It's just, I don't have the time. If I plan for these, like who I'm a huge admirer of, huge, is Andrew Huberman, who has my favorite podcast out there, the Huberman Lab, and it's on health and things like that. And it's clear he has a huge team of people, and he spends a lot of time prepping for everyone. I wish I could do that, because I know when I watch his and I watch mine back, I'm like, oh my God, I wish I was like him. but I don't have that type of time to be able to dedicate to it. I'll just tell the Bill stories as I think of them. Like, so one Bill, what would be a fun one? Well, I guess it would be like Bill was kind of like the absent-minded professor, and he didn't care about things. So when we would go to a lunch, we would go in his old Land Cruiser, Toyota Land Cruiser. So he was a guy who could have bought any car he wanted, and he had this old Land Cruiser, didn't care about it. It's like had a crack on the windshield, I think, and I don't think he ever changed the oil in that thing unless someone else did it for him. Thing was like falling apart, and he would still drive it. He didn't care. Didn't even have airbags, and so eventually they got him to get a car with airbags for the safety. But the guy would not put on his seatbelt, and so typically when we'd go to lunch, it would be like Bill driving and Wendy, one of the other PMs who I was very good friends with, and then myself in the back because it was just polite to always let a woman, up front. And Bill would turn around and look at me and start talking to me. And one, he wouldn't even have his seatbelt on. And so I said, Bill, we're not leaving until you put your seatbelt on. And he didn't like me telling him to do that, but I was not going to drive without him having a seatbelt. I was not going to be responsible for something happened to Bill, and it was on my watch. And so I'm like, Bill, we're not leaving until you. But he could have just driven anyways, but he would listen to me. But then he would be driving and he would like turn around and be talking to me, and I'd be like, Bill, look forward. So he was just absent-minded. He was just in his own world all the time, and I miss that guy. He was he a perfect person? No, but well, I'll tell this story. So he had this he really wanted to help other people out. And one of the things that he did is he had this thing in the paper called Leaders in Success, who we would call it the LNS or something like that. So, yeah. And it would take somebody important in history or maybe still around, and then have a page on them and how they became successful. Like, think like the best ones like a Thomas Edison or, Einstein or something like that. But, you're doing those all the time. They go to a lot of different people. And so he got really into that. That was one of his babies. And he just like models of stocks, he was really into models of people. And so we'd say, oh, well, Ronald Reagan, one of his idols, did things this way. And so then he would want to do things that way. And he'd really want to study it. And he had this whole thing where he was going to have this whole like amusement park that was about leaders. Like he had this envisionment, kind of like like Disneyland, but learning. And a lot of his wealth was going to go there. Now, as he retired, the state decided to not do that. Not on my place to say anything about that, other than what he really wanted was this. And he had this person who would write these really in-depth ones on it for him that he was going to end up using for this project. And she would have a team of people just read all the books. So let's say they were going to do Thomas Edison. This person would have to read everything there was on Thomas Edison and write the thing. And I remember talking to her once, and I go, I really want to be the next Livermore, the next Bill. Like that was my original goals. And this was shortly after my kids were born. And I remember talking to her about it and saying, well, I don't see people on here that are thought of as really like good fathers, or mothers, but most of them were men. It just is what it is. Um, and I didn't pick the people. It was just the sample that they chose, and be really good at their thing. And I'm like, what did you learn? What did you find about people that were able to balance out being a really good father versus that? And she like sat me down and like had to like tell me like, well, there aren't any. Like, like look at like the Steve Jobs of the world, or I don't want to put anybody down because I really looked up to him, but they didn't have that balance with their family. And well, that changed everything. Like that, I didn't want to be a Bill or a Livermore at that point, if that's what the sacrifice was. So the most important thing to me was being a father, not what all this, other stuff is. And not that everything else isn't super important to me, but then, and that was around the time that I stopped working on Saturdays and stuff to make sure that I was, had time with the kids. And then I used to get the print books when I was a PM So then I didn't have to print off the charts. They would custom print for me. So then I could take them with me wherever we went. So I could be studying. This is before like laptops had the, you know, Wi-Fi capability that we have now. So, if you weren't at your house, you were away from your PC and your laptop didn't really help unless you were plugged in. So anyways, just think about that, think about the balance thing. And I'll tell more Bill stories as time goes on. So let's go to our next one. Okay. Oh, Bust a Move. Hey, bud. Really nice meeting you. And that's obviously not his real name. You and your significant other last year. That was very nice. Let's see. Favorite David Lee Roth song? Okay. While under the mentorship of your idol, how did you find conviction to deviate from his methods and trade your own style? Oh, wow, that's a deep question. That was my biggest struggle. I kept trying to be Bill, and I'm not. I never will be, and I no longer want to be that. I wanted to be just the best that I can be at being me, which is still a struggle because I'm hardwired to want to try to be like Bill. And so I would try to do the things that he would do and do it the way he would do it. But uh, I realized that there are things that were different from me than him for various reasons. And, that's a big, long topic, probably too much for even one episode. But there was a time where he left us do whatever we wanted to do. And that was the best trading I ever had there because I could just trade my way. But then when he would get in there and start micromanaging, that's when I just couldn't make it work because you couldn't get it to be the way it should be if he was dictating it's got to be this way or how deep in the market. There were times where he would change how deep and invested we could be 5 times in one day. So that changes a lot of everything you're doing. Like if someone else is dictating how deep in the market you can be and they're doing it that frequently and you having to adjust things, that's problematic. And there were times where he kept us at 1% invested and, that was when he was micromanaging. And I'll just give a message to anyone who's a head PM at any place or anyone who's managing PMs. Let folks, and I was a head PM out here, let folks do their own thing. Doesn't mean they're always going to do it right, but they're going to have the best shot at being the best trader they can be, finding their style. So Bill was fine being 200% long one stock. I've been 200% long one stock, but man, freaks me out. So, I can go up to 100% and still not really have a comfort level, but I understand what I'm doing there and I understand the risks and everything. But really, I feel much more comfortable at like a 25%. Once I get above 25%, I start feeling a little like, okay, I'm realizing the risk I'm taking. And remember, out in the real world, like anything over 5% is a big position. So we're talking crazy numbers, but I'm just being honest with you. Because think about it, if he would say to be 4 to 8, be concentrated in 4 to 8 stocks, and you can be 200% long, well, 4 stocks, 200% long, that's 50% a stock, and that's just kind of what he would think would be normal. So deviating from him, like when I would deviate from him, that's a big topic and a really good question. It didn't always work out well because if I was deviating from him and I was doing well, no problem. He didn't ask any questions. Going through a normal slump, because I mean, just think about it. Your equity curve does not go from here to here, it goes up and down along the way, especially if you're doing concentrated positions. So if I was doing poorly, then he would look at what I'm doing and say all these things I was doing wrong. Whereas really, those were the same things I was doing when I was number one on the list and up here instead of here. And so that would mess with you. So, advice for anybody, do your own thing. That's why I always harp on do your own thing, do it your own way. And that's hard enough having someone else tell you how to do it. And it drives me crazy because you see a lot of people who are like, oh, you should only position trade, or you should only do it this way, or you should only do 10 trades a year, or you should only do it. Dude, if that works for you, do it for you. That doesn't mean it works for everyone else. Like for me, I like doing my shotgun style, which was not popular at the firm, where I like putting my feelers out to get feedback. And some people would look at that and go, well, that's not the right way to do it. And you need to be much more precise. And I'd call it a shotgun versus a sniper. There's a time to be a sniper and time to be to a shotgun, time for a bazooka and time for a hand grenade. There's a time for every weapon out there. And your goal is to try to figure out which one to use and when. And don't let anyone tell you that there's only one way to do it and you should do it their way because they're on a streak. And it could be a multi-year streak or whatever. But let me tell you, I've been around a lot of traders and everyone has their hot times. Everyone has their cold times, myself included. I've been as hot as the sun and as cold as freaking Antarctica and everything in between. And I've seen the same with other people. Sometimes folks are just a little bit more mellow along the way. So anyways, that's a big topic. Great question. Let's do the next one. Let's see. Okay, I'll try to be quicker so I can get through a little bit. Maybe a little something on your best yearly trading performance. So talked about that. The best performance I had was the 99, 1640%. So you can revisit that question or that answer that I gave, or go back and read the fear or listen to the fear or the greed, not fear, greed, fear or goals episodes that I did. I stopped buying albums when Van Hagar was formed. Oh my God, you're too funny. Okay, so Van Hagar is what some folks call the best period of Van Halen, when it was from 5150, the album 5150, um, until when Sammy left before David came back. And so people would call it Van Hagar. And some people hate Van Hagar. Some people love Van Hagar. The ones who love it, they're right. The ones who hate it, they're wrong. It's a fact. Okay. Let's see. Amazing. Thanks again, Mike. Can you go in depth in regards to ATR, average true range, and how it relates to stop loss, setting stop losses? Justin, you are buddies from way back when. Share your favorite Justin story. Thanks, champ. Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so the question in depth on ATR. Okay, so average true range, that's something that I've really, when I said, when I came back to IBD, some of the things I wanted to do was share things that I've learned over the years. And Bill would always talk about not trading wild and loose stocks. I call them wild and crazy, the ones that are all over the place. And the reason for that is because if a stock is all over the place, nobody knows what to pay for it. In the morning, it's $50. In the afternoon, it's $40. And by the close, it's $45 or anything in between. But no one knows what to pay for. And it's just moving along. So then you're either going to get lucky or unlucky. So I like trading things that are tighter traders. They're more at an equilibrium. And then you get them on the chart the right way and blah, blah, blah. So average true range is a big part of what I do now. And so I slice it a lot of different ways. And you brought up Justin. So Justin and I did a webinar on an IBD webinar on his podcast on the average true range, portfolio average true range. One of my things, I don't know if other people do it. I'm sure they do, but I never saw anyone else do it. It was just an idea I had where you take your portfolio, you take the weight of it. So let's say it's a 25% weight, and you multiply that by your ATR. Let's say it's a 5% ATR. And then you sum that up. And then you look at your cash position as well. If you have a cash position, because that would get a 0. And if you're on margin, then that hits you the other way. And so you look at your portfolio ATR. So that is averaged out with all of your positions and their ATRs, how much you can expect your account to swing on any given day, on any given normal day. It doesn't mean it's going to do it. That would be as if all your stocks hit their full average range on one day. Sometimes it's going to be bigger, sometimes a lot smaller, but it gives you an idea of how much risk you're taking on. So that's how I like to use ATRs. From a trailing stop standpoint, I have a way of doing that, but I'll probably do an episode on that. ATR, some of these are just too big for a short answer. ATR, trailing. So jot that down too. Favorite Justin story. My favorite Justin story would be in June of 2000 when I might have told this story before, but I went to New York for the first time, and Gil and Chris were presenting there with Bill. I said, "Man, I've never been to New York. Gil, I wish, I would go just to hold your bags, to carry your bags." And it was kind of an offhanded joke, but I was serious. And then a couple days later, he's like, "Okay, you're going," and and so I was just there to help to use his laptop and be his presenter. So Justin was in charge of Bill and do all the slides and all the laptop work for Bill. And then I was going to do it for Chris and Gil, Chris Ketcher and Gil Morales. And they were PMs there and they were senior PMs. I was just gotten money that earlier that year. And this was June of 2000. So I go there and I'm scared. Like, I'm not even on stage. I'm just sitting in the back and I'm going to just have to work the laptop. And I was scared because I only used mice were actually trackballs. I was one of the first people to use a trackball because I've got an old shoulder injury, a rotator cuff, so I can't use a mouse because it irritates it too much and I can't get the fine movements. And so all this had was this little trackpad on their laptop where you use with a finger, and I still can't figure out how to use those. And I was stressed as can be. I'm like, how am I going to do this? And when you do charts at a live presentation, you got to be on the flowing and everything. So I was as stressed as can be, and my shoulder was so irritated from the travel and carrying stuff. And I was in a world of pain. And here I was there. All I was supposed to be, the firm pays for my trip out there, and all I needed to do was just work the computer. And I think they were only on stage for like a half an hour or something. So it was a tiny little bit. Justin saw, I don't even think he remembers, but he saw one of the reasons why I call him the saint. He saw the stress I was under and he's like, "I'll do it." And I'm like, "Are you sure?" Well, it was no big deal to him at all. It was like, it was nothing for him, but for me, it was everything. And I never forgot that because I was so stressed out about that. And so there's another reason why I would say be kind. You never know. The weight of the world was like lifted off my shoulders because here I was like, "Oh, I've worked so hard to become a PM. I'm finally a PM, and I'm here with these senior PMs that at the time I looked up to, and Bill and everything, and I'm gonna mess this up, and everyone's gonna look back at me and be like, 'Who's the guy doing the machine?'" Because every once in a while, if Justin would mess something up, Bill would be like, "Well, Justin, too much turkey for lunch, huh?" But it was always Bill just changing things up at the last minute and blaming it on poor Justin. And Justin never told people that, but I'm telling people it was Bill, not Justin, who messed up. And he would just point the finger at Justin, which you learn from everything of what they do. And someone can be your idol, but you can also learn from them what not to do. So, but that was my favorite Justin story. And the other thing about Justin is he doesn't stress. And I don't think that guy stresses, and I can be a stress case, like beyond stress case, normally about my personal life, not work. But, well, Bill's around. I always stress about Bill because Bill could stress anybody out, including myself, like nonstop. But I saw Justin stretching out his calves one day, and I'm like, "Oh, wow, I've never seen anyone do that and work." And he tells me this thing like, "Oh, well, he read this thing about how it reduces your stress or whatever." And then I started, anytime I was in my office, I'd be stretching my calves because I'm like, "Well, Justin said it's got to be true." And then I told him this like a decade later. And he's like, "Dude, I was just messing with you." And it was just cracks me up. But stretch your calves out. It does relax you quite a bit. But anyways, Justin is as good as it gets. Okay, so that was the last one on the original post. So let's go over to one of these where I reposted it. Was this from today or? Yeah. Okay, so I'm doing this chronological. So on the 17th, I retweeted this. Let's see, SoCal Mike, hey, bud. Building a watch list. What specific items do you look at and consider when scanning through stocks? What tells, let's see, what tells you to add it to your list, and what specifically tells you to quickly pass it up to move on next? Okay, that is a great question. And so when I go through things, I'll go through 1,000+ charts in the morning, right? And I have a very specific process. But essentially what I'm asking myself is, as I'm going through this quickly, is this a stock that I want to follow? Period. Something about it looks interesting to me. I will flag it. I just hit the F5 key in market search and it puts a flag on it. And then when I'm through that list, I take those flag stocks and I put it into my watch list, and then I go through it slowly and do more analysis. But at my first pass, it's just, is this interesting to me? Then the rest of it happens later. And I think I did one on this maybe back when it was like how I use market surge or something like that. But I'm going to do a full episode, and I think it would be fun. And I'm going to pretty much, because it's football season, I don't want football. I think it's still football season. Yeah, it's still football season. And I always wanted to do something that was called because with football is like any given Sunday, or any given Monday, or whatever the saying was. I was going to do one any given Sunday. And maybe that's what the thing is, but it was because every Sunday night at 7:00, I had to call Bill, and I'm going to do what my full routine was for that and share it with you guys of how I would actually prep for those calls. And that might be a couple episodes long, but then I'll go through that whole kind of triage procedure that I go through there. Let me see. What else did he ask? What tells you? Okay. So that'll be a lot on that one. Let's go to the next one. We'll just try to get through a few more. I'll do another one of these so we can do the other ones, and if people want to ask more questions. Okay. So next question. Sorry, not a fan of the new market surge. Yeah, no problem, man. If you don't like it, use something else. You don't have to use it. Let's see. Doesn't hurt my feelings. It is what it is. You can't please all the people. Okay, let's see what's next. With volatility nowadays, do you think smaller sizing with wider stops is the key? Wow, gotta say, I was doing a workshop with Chuck years ago, and it was during a choppy environment. I was getting chopped up, and I was telling people about, how I have such tight stops. And the person said, well, don't you think it would be smarter to just have smaller size positions with a wider stop? I said, yeah, absolutely. And it makes so much sense. And then every time I try to do that, those wider stops just kill me. Like, cause I'm used to this. It's kind of something I picked up from Livermore. Well, it was reinforced from Livermore, but it was something I picked up on my own, that my best trades were ones that I was up on right away and didn't stop me out. And this kind of goes back to that trading from 97 to 99, where I was trying to become a PM for Bill. That was just my rule back then, was if at the end of the day, if I was down on a stock, because what I did is I did a post analysis and I saw that a lot of my losses would get to a breaking point, then I'd sell them and then they'd go up, and I was just letting them get too big. So I wanted to cut them right away. And so my rule was, if I'm not up on it at the end of the day, I'm out. And that helped me sleep at night so much. And that was such a great way of trading. Unfortunately, back then, commissions were high and slippage was high, that it really hurt things quite a bit. But so there's a long way of saying that those wider stops are just hard for me personally. So I always think of something when someone says something, go, okay, if I was designing an algo, would that be the better way to do it? Because there's this feedback loop, personal feedback loop, that can cause you problems. Because then if you got a bunch of stocks that, let's say I like to cut my losses at 3.5%, and I let things go to 7%, and I've got a string of those, then my drawdown is bigger and I'm more timid on that next one. So I'd rather just go in there and maybe even tighten up those stops more, just because then I would be afraid that I'm not going to take on that trade when that trade is there, because of being out of my comfort zone. But if that's in your comfort zone, then do it. And typically when people are asking a question, my response is, do it your way. Because if you're asking that question, it means that's where you are wired. And so do it and try it out and make notes of what you learn from it, good and bad, and maybe adjust. But I do think the strategy makes more sense. So basically, when you're in a choppy environment, like it's been choppy the last quarter, of 2025, and I got chopped up a lot during that. It was a really bad quarter for me, and it could have been solved by having much wider stops. Um, but that's using hindsight. Now, I don't know if I used wider stops back then, if then the trading would have been even worse because my psyche would have been off. But from an algo, meaning a black box, which I designed, William O'Neill and Company's first algo, it's kind of a proof of concept and everything. There's so much you can learn from that, because with that, you got to think of every last what if thing. So it's if you put yourself in that mindset that you're going to program something in, this is an algo, and I did 2 of them that we just didn't launch the second one, that it forces you to think about, well, what if this thing happens that has never happened before in time, but does happen? Like the flash crash, that had never happened before. Programming in what are you going to do during if that happens? And it's you'll learn so much from that. And I think as it becomes easier, I think now with AI, it's going to become a lot easier for people to be able to create algos. I would love to create another algo or two. So rewarding. But the thing is, when you're done with algo, you're bored because you're like, you got to just let it bake and do what it's supposed to do and not go in and want to tinker with it. Because if you're tinkering, you're data fitting to the current market. You need to do it a certain way. Maybe I'll do one on algos. I'm building algos. Yeah. You're jotting down these notes, but I'll probably forget where I put them. But what was the question? Oh, wider stops. And I'm going off on this, and it is classic Webby. So, anyways, yes to your question. I could have just said yes. Future Mike. Remember that. Here's our next one. What is your last minute buy and sell checklist for timing, entry, and exits? Okay, that's a good question. They're all good questions, frankly. What I would say, my final thing is knowing where I'm wrong. If I don't know where I'm wrong before I place the trade, I'm not going to place the trade unless I'm doing something wrong. Like we always do mess up, but you should know where that exit is ahead of time. It could just be, hey, you're down X%. I know a lot of people who like using 5% as their stop. Makes a lot of sense because 3.5% sometimes is too tight. The 5% is kind of works. In ATR makes a lot more sense because think about it. If a stock has an ATR, means normally trades on a given day 2.5%. Well, 5% is a 2 ATR move. Well, that chart is going to look terrible. You should have sold it way before that. But if you're trading a 10 ATR stock and it's down 5% on you, well, that's really a nothing burger. So that's why trading the higher ATR stocks is a lot trickier. Let's see. Let's go to the next question. Questions for AMA. This is from Lost Together. Do you ever invest in options when you see a stock breaking out? Thanks again. Okay, options. If you haven't picked up on it yet, I'm something. I say I've got Asperger's. I've never been diagnosed, but kind of feel like I do. Or I have OCD. Never been diagnosed. Kind of feel like I do. Maybe not perfect at both of those, but I'm a little weird. If you've been watching, you can kind of tell. So with options, that's a really scary thing because, and I have a lot of really good friends, smart friends I've met through X and in real life that have offered to help me out learn options because they're really good at it. And I just tell myself, I just don't have the time at this point in my life between, you know, um, you've got to look at your logical timeline, what you've got left and what you can accomplish. And I know that if I, with my obsessive nature that I have, if I'm going to start trading options in a big way, I'm going to be an expert in options. And to be an expert in options, I don't think you could do anything, but I couldn't do anything but just focus on options for like 2-3 years and like read everything there is on it, dig deep into it, watch everything there is on it, and do it the right way. And I think it would really pay off. But I don't know that I have 3 years right now to dedicate to that. So I'm not at this point. So when I do options, I just do it as leverage. meaning, and this is the way I saw Bill do it, where he was in a stock, he really liked the stock, and he already had a massive position and he just wanted a little extra juice. So he would buy some out of the money calls on there and typically out in the distance quite a bit. So typically what'll end up happening, this is a cycle that's happened several times throughout my career, that I'll be in there, I'll be having a really good year. I'll want a little bit more juice. I'll be like, I can risk 10% of my account in options. Even if they go to zero, I'm still having a great year, and start doing it. Then what inevitably happens, because I'm not doing the options the way a lot of people do, they're like kind of the smart way where, the upside is more limited, but the downside is dramatically more limited, like the smart way of doing it. I just would buy the call out of the money calls, out maybe 90 days to, or even go out to leaps or whatever. And when they start working, you start making so much money and losing a lot too. Like the volatility becomes so crazy that your body starts getting wired, your mind starts getting wired for these really wild moves. And then you could have, let's say in your normal stock portfolio, you could have like a 3% up day or even a 5% up day. And you'd be like, oh, that's nothing. If I would have done it with options, it would have been 15% or 20%. And then you start going down this path, at least I do. And then you start going, well, yeah, I could buy that with stock, but why don't I do, instead of 10% of my account being options, let me do a little bit more, a little bit more. And it never ends well for me. I always end up getting killed in that option account because I push it too much. So if I had an algo that I was doing, I would definitely design it to buy options at the breakout and do it in a very specific way that even with my relatively limited, I downplay my knowledge of options because I'd rather downplay something than act like I know something more than I really do. But in how I would trade them would be, and that's just a lesson in life for my grandkids, like never act like you know something you don't know. It's always better to act like you don't know it and know it than the other way around. Trust me, I made that mistake once and only once. No, I'm not going to go on that tangent. Just remind me. So anyways, with the options, I would do it 5 to 10% of the account, not after they've increased in value, but 5 to 10% of the account. If I was up on the year, what I considered a significant amount where I had that amount to give up, that it wouldn't kill the year if I lost all of that, and then just keep it to that amount. And if your options increase in value to where they're 20, 30% of your account, that's fine, but you can't put any more money into those options until it's at 5 or 10%, whatever your limit is, or 1%, or you pick what's comfortable to you. And I think if you do it that way, talking to myself, that I wouldn't get in that situation where all of a sudden I've got 70% of my account in options and then the market goes through a correction and then the time value kills me and then I've got blood all over the place, and I've been there, done that, and I'll keep relearning that lesson. It is what it is. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Okay, let's see. Is your better half matching the same healthy lifestyle difficult enough to have a smooth relationship without having daily habits? Okay, so my better half is, we do things differently, and she does things her way and she's a very private person. So I'll leave that part out. But I did say I was going to look at all of these questions. But I will say one of the things she does that I just love is she has this little app. I think it's called Noon or something like that. And she will literally, everything that we buy, she will scan it to see what it gets on this. I want to say it's Noon. It could be something else where it gives his score of like how healthy is it for you. And she got me off of like using aluminum based antiperspirants and stuff because of that, because they all were getting bad scores. And we do distilled water, or she does it, she makes this juice for me that's just out of this world as far as healthy. It's got everything in it from carrots and beets, and we have this juicer, and she'll spend an entire day doing this, like washing it and washing it in a specific way to get rid of all the bad stuff. She's a vegetarian as well, if that's what your question was. But then let's see, what does she put in there? beets, celery, carrots, pineapple for taste, cilantro. I'd have to ask her all these things like pomegranates, all these healthy things, and puts it in there, and then you drink it in ginger, turmeric, um, all these different things. So we're not, yeah, I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not a health guru, but but she's into that, and that's great and all. And I'll leave the rest of it. Like I said, she's a very private person. So let's do the next one. Let's see. Tips on selling into strength as a swing trader, extension from moving average. How does ATR factor into this? Okay, that tells me that I need to do one on my Webby RSI, RSI, and because that's an indicator that I built that has something in relationship to selling extended, and that's a big topic, and I'll have to do one on that. So please remind me of these as time goes on, but that's a very good question. Okay, let's see. Anton, let's see. You mentioned during your doing smaller buys until feedback shows beating the S&P. How do you determine it? Taking RS uh, of your total portfolio versus SPY with 100% investment means positions. How do you determine it? Blah, blah, blah. Just, okay. So basically, this is a question about my shotgun approach and how I'll do a bunch of small positions until I'm making progress, and then I'll get more concentrated. And that's such a big topic. I will have to do a whole thing on that shotgun approach. But in a nutshell, when there's any turns in the market, I'll either gravitate towards ETFs and or doing the shotgun approach with a bunch of the small positions, because as things are turning, you're not sure exactly what sector or areas are going to work. And I'd rather cast that wide net, see what's sticking, and then increase those. And it's not always specific versus, okay, on this date, my account was this, and then the S&P was here, and so I've got to beat it by 2x or something. It's not like that. It's much more of a with my own account, with a feel for it, versus with the swing trader thing we use. Justin creates for me an RS line of our equity curve our equity curve, how the account is doing versus S&P 500, and just a ratio. And so that is your RS. And then I put moving averages on that, or I haven't put that on there. And so many times I'll say, okay, well, we're going to stay at this smaller position size until we can get our RS through its moving averages for 3 consecutive days or 5 consecutive days or something like that. It just depends on the situation, like how bad the drawdown is. If it's a bad drawdown, then I'm going to want more evidence before I start getting concentrated. If it's a shallow one, I'm right away ready to turn back. So a lot of it is have your equity curve, and then build RS lines against that, and then build moving averages against that, and then use the moving averages that work for you. For a swing trading account, a 10 and a 21 day makes sense. You can use an 8 and a 21, or a 13 and a 21, or a 5 and a 21, or a 5, 8, 13 and 21. If you're doing position trading, then I would do more of like a 21 and a 50, or a 21 and a 55, or 21 and a 34 and a 55. Or even you can go out to out further, an 89 or what have you, or if you like round numbers, you can do 100 days or 200 or something like that. So find what works for you. Okay, so that was the last one on this. Well, yeah, let's just go through this. I put another one out right before this. Let's see what questions we got. Oh, we only got 2 questions. Adam says, if you could only trade one setup swing trading, what would it be and why? Oh, that's easy. And it would be the same for position trading and swing trading. And that would be a shakeout, upside reversal. Typically preferred in the handle of a cup with handle, but it doesn't have to be there. It can be a pullback in around the 21 day that does that. But basically you shake out. So you're coming down And then typically you have a wider spread day that takes out all the recent lows and then turns and closes up in the upper half. Higher up, the better. It doesn't even have to close up on the day, but a big spread closing in the upper half, that is my go-to. If I only traded that setup, I'd be much better off. But the problem is there's times in the market where those aren't out there because you have to have the market sell off or the sector sell off to cause that stock to sell off. And it's the first one that turns up that is where you want to go. And so that would be, my go-to. Because then you have a natural stop. You don't have to worry, is 3%, 5%, 7% the right number? The low of that day is your right number. Now, if you have to mitigate the risk by having a tighter stop than that, there's nothing wrong with that. But that is when you really know that it is broken. So that's my favorite one. We're actually going to finish all the questions, I think. Okay. Well, hopefully this is turning out right. I just had another technical problem. We were on our last question. Let's go back to that question again. So from Java, which rock legend's hometown landmark concert do you hope to visit next? So as I've talked about in earlier episodes, I went in 2012, 2013. We went to London to do a workshop, and I brought the kids. And one of the things that I did is we rented a house out there, out near Eric Clapton's house. It was a sheep farm. It's such a wonderful place. And the reason why I did it is because I wanted to just visit Clapton's house. And so I went there and I named my son after him. And so the two of us took a photo in front of his gate. And I could have just taken a photo in front of any gate and said that this is where we were. But to me, it was something very, very special. Clapton is such a special person to me. And it's, it was very special to take the family there and for both of us to take a picture in front of it. I was secretly hoping that he was going to see us on the camera and open up and give us an autograph, but probably more likely send out the frickin' security and say, "Get away, you crazy person." So, and I have driven by some other famous people's houses because I think it's fun. It's like back in the day, when you go out to California and you like star maps and stuff, but I don't care about any stars really. It's just a few places that are important to me, like the Dead House um, the in San Francisco. Tried to drive to the 5150 during my road trip. It was actually that same day that I think it was the same day that we hit San Francisco, or maybe it was the next day, just to take a picture in front of that house. Drove down. Yeah, it was probably the next day. Drove down to the 51 Eddie Van Halen's house where the 5150 Studios is, and I just wanted to take a picture in front of the property. But when I finally got there, I didn't realize that the street that it was on was a private street and it had all these signs like, "Oh, you get arrested" or whatever. And I'm like, well, I didn't want to invade family's privacy and everything. And, but would have loved to have just taken a picture in front of that. So landmarks, well, during that same road trip, I had planned on going up to Seattle to see the Jimi Hendrix grave. And there was the museum up there with, all of his stuff. And we ended up not making it up there. We turned around in Oregon and came on back down. But the next one would be going up there. What was the other part of the question? Which legends or concert do you hope to go to next? Well, the concert that I would love to go to that I haven't gone to, and I don't know if there'll be another one, will be the Clapton Crossroads that he puts on a benefit where he has a bunch of people come out and do a set, and he gives that money to his charity. So if you don't know about his charity, when he got sober and is over in Antigua, hope I'm not mispronouncing that island, and he then took all of his special guitars, sold them at auction, and used that money to fund this place that takes all the locals and everything that is mainly, non-white folks that are addicted to drugs or alcohol. And, they're able to go through this program at a discounted price for free or something like that. And that's what he does. And so now every few years he puts on this festival and it's all the best people out there. And I just, for one reason or another, haven't been able to make it to them. So I hope he has another one. That would be one. Next thing would be, honestly, man, I just love going to see Marcus King. Every time he's around, I go to see him, very much like I used to go see Johnny Lang. Every time he was in town, I probably saw him more times than anybody. Had to be at least 40 or 50 times. But he lost his ability to sing in around this time in 2020, I think it was. So this is going on 6 years, and he has a vocal cord problem. And as a person who has a vocal cord disorder, that's a big deal. So I understand that, and so I hope if anyone knows Johnny Lang, just tell him that there's people out there that are sending well wishes to him all the time, like all the time, man. He's such a he's an inspiration. It's really hard to get inspiration from someone younger than you. And boy, was he just a positive role model. So if you have never listened to his stuff, Johnny Lang, I would listen to like Anything's Possible is one of my favorite songs of his. And he's got a lot of great tunes out there. I would love for him to come back in when he gets healthy, or at least just play guitar for someone's band. Going to see Kenny Wayne Shepherd, February 20th. Can't wait for that. Obviously with what happened with, Bob Weir, still not over that, not even remotely. I don't think anyone is, just, it's like, wow. I'm hoping Dead and Company stays together and John Mayer is able to find an appropriate replacement for that. I think there's, a lot of people out there that could fit that spot. I think Billy Strings would be good in there. God, there would be so many people that would be good for, mesh in that. But just whoever he picks, I'll be happy with if they can keep that going, especially if they can do that at the Sphere. As far as anyone else, I mean, definitely want to go to Legends again, Buddy Guy's place in Chicago. Want to go down and on one of my next road trips, I want to go down and kind of into the Delta and see where Robert Johnson and all those folks and kind of go through that area, and that would be a lot of fun. But man, you're getting me to really think through a ton of stuff, and I really can't wait. Frankly, a lot of the concerts, but see Mammoth again, see Miles Kennedy again, is the new Alter Bridge, which Miles Kennedy's band with Mark. That's just the new album, self-titled album. It's their 8th album. Actually recorded part of it at 5150 Studios. The only people to be able to record there. And that album is just killer. It's so good. So looking forward to seeing him soon. But really, Marcus King, man, if he was in town, I'd go see him every day of the week and twice on Sundays. So go catch him. With that said, it's time for your payment. So let me get my Venmo app out. Venmo is do a kind thing on behalf of the WebbyRamblesOn.com. So that's the Venmo for this week. So again, you got it. Every time you watch one of these episodes, if this is your first episode, we are trying to change the world. Do we think we can change the world? Well, you always want to hope for the best, right? And you never know what can, the butterfly effect, if you don't know what that is, look it up, that, we can change this world, and we've got to stop waiting on the world to change. We've got to change the world, and you can do that by being a part of the solution, not part of the problem. The problem, in my opinion, is everyone's fighting against each other. Oh, I'm a Republican, so I hate the Democrats. I'm a Democrat, I hate the Republicans. I'm Jewish, so I hate the Muslims. I'm Muslim, so I hate the Jewish. Or I'm Catholic, so I hate the Protestants. Or I'm this and I hate that. I love USC, so I hate UCLA. Or I like Coca-Cola, so I hate Pepsi. Or all this silliness, man. Just, we're all in this together. Like, let's realize that at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all have the same needs, right? And wants and desires. And so let's try to help everyone together, rather. You don't have to push someone down to get ahead. You can lift people up. And so being kind is the message of all the Webby rambles on is being kind, and that is your job. Every episode, you're on the honor system to just go and do a kind thing, and it can be something kind for a person, can be something kind for an animal, an insect, anything that you can think of. Just help someone out in need. And sometimes it's just like when you just want to go off on somebody, like someone is just deserves it, and then you choose not to. Sometimes being kind is just by not being mean, even if mean is the appropriate thing. Like, you know, so there's different kind acts, and it could be as simple as opening the door for someone who wasn't expecting it, just holding that door open a little bit longer. And do this specially. And again, like, as I said, I do this for two reasons. One, for you guys to have something free to watch, but two, something if my kids ever want to start learning how to trade, or they have this, or if when they have kids, their kids want to learn how to trade, to watch this. Some of the things are just kind of, life lessons. And so being kind is such an important part of that. But one of the things is like, open the door for the people like that wouldn't expect the door to be held for them. You can fill in the blank for whatever that is, like the janitor's coming and they've got their mop and everything. Go and open it up for them. I'll tell a story. I don't think I've told this on here, and I'll end with this. Okay. So I've tried telling this story a couple times, but every time I tell it, I'm realizing that I could be giving away details about this person, and I just don't want to out anybody. So I'm going to say it very generically. And this is how sometimes going to help somebody is um, can end up blowing up in your face. So I was at some place, and there was a janitor there walking through, and normally people just ignore the janitors. And he was an old black guy. Well, not like super old, like not 70, but like late 60s. And you could tell he'd seen better days. And, and he's working there. And I had a Led Zeppelin shirt on. And I'm like, just chilling, just waiting. That's all I'll say. And he starts making a comment about the shirt. I said, "Oh, you're a fan." And then we started talking music. And then was the first person I was talking music to that I was learning stuff from. And I'm like, wow. Make a long story short, he had played with everyone. He'd played with BB King, he'd played with people in Prince's band, he'd played with all these people, and he wasn't full of it because he was showing me videos on his phone of this stuff. And we just started talking up a storm and talking about all this stuff. And my better half was there, and she was like thinking, okay, well, how can we help this guy out? Like, he's just been down on his luck. He's a janitor now. And, he was playing with all these legends back in the day. And what could we do? And I'm like, well, she's like, well, why don't we have him come over and you can pay him to give you guitar lessons, something you wanted to get good at. And I could certainly use the help. And then I'm helping him out. I could pay him and I could get something out of it, and it would be a mutually beneficial. So we're thinking, I'm being kind, but first just chatting with this guy. That's the original thing, is be kind. Sometimes it come back and bite you. And so we're talking up a storm and then having a blast. And he's sending me, and then we had to go. And he's sending me all these videos, and I'm sending him stuff. And anyways, to make a long story short, I'm super excited. And when we were gonna come back from the road trip, we were gonna go out and take him out to dinner and everything, and then ask him if he wanted to teach me guitar, or teach me how to make it better. And and so I'm looking him up, and then all of a sudden I find out he's a serial rapist who was let out. And I'm just devastated. So here was this guy, is being kind to, and it's like, I'm sorry, man. I'm a believer in long prison sentences, and we all make mistakes, and you pay but whatever. Get certain governments are very lenient, and so as it turned out, thank God I looked him up and found that information out. Otherwise, he would have been in the house, and who knows? It wasn't like a one-time deal. Not that that would be okay, but everything that I read, and you can't believe everything you read on the internet, but I read it from enough sources that he was like, like most likely for decades doing this thing. And it's like, that's the opposite of me. I'm a nonviolent person. And, like, you're like, I don't want any of that in my world. And so sometimes being nice can bite you, right? Because I was nice to this person. We struck up a conversation and all this stuff. And he ended up not being the person that I was hoping he was going to be. In the end, it was still nice. I would still do it over again. But it's just a message for my grandkids that just always, realize that not everyone is the person that you think that they are. And so you just always want to be careful, but still be kind anyways, because it's doing, you don't want to be mean to people and go, oh, wait, I saw someone who looked like this before and they turned out to be a bad person. So, I'm not going to like tall people or short people or whatever, um, choose your nationality or something. Just go, everyone's unique and there's good people and bad people of all shapes, size, colors, and everything under the sun and ages. And there's bad old people and bad young people and good ones and everything. So just treat everyone equally and treat everyone with kindness, but then, also have your eyes wide open. So with that, this was our first Ask Me Anything. I got through every question that at least that I saw. And if you guys want another one, let me know in the comments. And in fact, in the comments here on YouTube, why don't you ask me your questions there? And then that will be what I'll use a combination of on this episode, the questions, as well as I'll post again on Twitter or on X, and we'll do a combo of those. If you guys like them, if you're like, this was a waste of my time, Mike, I didn't do one chart, then I'll stop doing them. It's like, this is for all of you guys and for my grandkids. And since they're not here, they can't tell me that they didn't like it. But hopefully this wasn't a total bomb. I know I babbled on, but let me see if any others came in. See if any other questions. A couple questions came through. You know what? We'll save those for next time. They weren't here when I recorded it, but we will do those. Wait, let me just see. Okay, let me just share this one. Yeah, I'm not even going to share it. Just George Trade says, what are the setups top 5 with the highest probabilities of success? Well, that's a really hard question to answer fully because with that, you would have to be able to measure it. So when I did my big study of every base and automated that study, so it was pure, just the data speaking for itself, it could tell you like the IPO base was more successful than all the other bases, and it would have the success rate of each base, and depending on how you slice it. So you really need to do an automated studies. What I would say is my upside reversal is my number one setup because that's my comfort level. The next one would be a breakout of a shelf, a Webby shelf. I got to jot that down. I should do one on that Webby shelf. Just one of the things I invented where you've broken out of a base, could be any type of base, double bottom cup, flat base. It doesn't matter. You've gone up a little bit, not a lot, and then it just pauses and holds tight. It could be like 4 days, 5 days, 15 days, short period of time in relatively tight, then in a tight fashion and breaking out above a resistance area there. That would be next one. A setup day, a Webby setup day would be, gotta jot that down. Got to do one on that. A Webby setup day is, in a nutshell, it's an area of resistance. Could be anywhere in a base, outside of a base, but there's a clear area of resistance. Resistance could be a downtrend, could be horizontal, could be a pattern. But the day before, it has a tiny spread, tiny, 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 tiny spread, like less than half of normal, like really small spread, and closes almost at the high, right up against that resistance. That's telling you that stock is, for some reason, was under the radar that day, but it's set up to go the next day. And everyone who knows that stock and knows charts are going to be all over that next day. Doesn't mean that it always works, but that's one of my favorite setups. Shake-up plus 3 has become, I have an episode on that, my take on the Shake-up plus 3, the Livermore Shake-up plus 3. And IPO bases, when IPO bases work, and I think we're getting back into that phase slowly of, you can go back and watch the Google IPO base, Google Model Book / IPO base episode for the IPO base is something that I invented. So those would be, I don't know if that was 5, but those would be my favorite. I'm just trying to think. Really any upside reversal, outside day, upside reversal are kind of my go-tos. Everything else is just kind of the trades you kind of have to do because you don't always get those upsides. But with that said, I think we've done a lot here, probably a little bit too long. Sorry. But with that said, go be kind and peace out.